And so that is sort of what we figured out is what we found out is that a lot of services businesses, especially financial services businesses, right, rely a lot on customer data to make a lot of decisions, right? So you have your traditional retail banking, but then you also have your enterprise lending, right? You have your corporate insurance, you have your wealth and asset management, wherein you're making a lot of money from very, very few set of users, right? So the problem then becomes that the user has a certain level of service provision expectation, right? That I am going to get this level of personalization in whatever I do if I bank with you. If you're in a private banking company, right, you work with like Axis Private or something like that, you expect that RM to know almost everything about you all the time, right? And so sort of that is what we figured out, because I had worked at GeoSound right before this in like recommendations, right? So there the challenge we had was the exact opposite. You had 100 million monthly active users, right? And you had to personalize for only 3 activities. The feed that shows up on your homepage, search results, and ads, right? But over here, like anyone who's worked with any services business knows, right? The process that ends up going into making that business work is very dynamic, right? And so if you start to end up with all these end-to-end learning pipelines which are like very inference optimized, you end up nowhere. Because you have a lot of user data obviously, but about very few customers. So for example, like just to give you an idea of scale, right? Axis Burgundy, which is like the biggest private banking sort of group in India, has only about 5,500 customers, right? Which is quite little compared to what could happen, right? And so that is where we figured out we need to go look at foundational models, right? Train them how to understand metadata about customers correctly, and sort of work in an environment where you would have access to customer data only at inference and never at training, right? And the reason for this is quite sound from like service providers even outside financial services, is that their core moat is their customer relationship data, right? And therefore they can't let that leave their premises at any cost. So that is what we sort of finally settled on and working on, right? Is how do you help financial services companies do personalization without using any of their customer data training. So that is kind of what we settled on, right? I'll like because of the second part I did promise that. So around foundational models, right? So as I started my sentence earlier, that like the moment you end up fine-tuning a foundational model, you've already made a little bit of a mistake in picking either a use case or your customer or the raw data that you're working with, right? And so now what you want to do is you want to fine-tune for things